Hi there, folks. Today we're looking at writing equations in slope-intercept form, and there are two approaches we're going to take to this. The first is basically only if we have the two pieces we need. If we have the slope and we have the y-intercept, we'll just go right to writing it as y equals mx plus b, because the slope-intercept form only needs the slope and the y-intercept, and we know that b is the y value from the y-intercept. So if we have those two things, yeah, we'll go right to it. If not, what we're going to do is we're going to find the slope in a point, and we're going to use point slope form, all right? But now the question's not asking us for point slope form, it's asking us for slope intercept. So once we have point slope form, we're going to rewrite it as y equals mx plus b. We're going to distribute that m value, we're going to distribute that slope, and then we're going to add that y value over the other side. We're going to get y by itself, okay? We're going to do the same thing that we did in the previous lesson. And honestly, you don't have to do this first piece. You don't ever have to do writing it right in y equals mx plus b format. You could always do it this way and then rewrite it in slope-intercept form, okay? And most of the examples we're going to do this way will only go right to slope-intercept form if we have the two things that we need, okay? For example, if I look at something like this guy, says the slope is 8 and the y-intercept is -7. This is a situation where they're giving us the m value and the b value. They're giving us this guy and they're giving us this guy as the slope and the y-intercept. So I can go right to slope-intercept form and say, hey, this is y equals 8 times x and then a -7. And that's it. And we could plug it right in. And now here's the thing. You don't have to do that. You could write this in point slope form if you write this as an ordered pair. Remember, this is the ordered pair 0, -7, okay? And so now from here, you could plug that into point slope form. You could plug it into this guy, and then you just have to rewrite it, all right? If I look at the next one, same thing. Slope is 3/4. The y-intercept is -3, so they're giving us m. They're giving us b. Remember, b is the y-intercept. So the equation would be y equals 3/4 x and then -3, because that's the b value, all right? Again, you could write this in point slope form first and call this 0, -3, and then plug it into point slope form and rearrange it for y, all right? But again, that's a bit of work that's kind of unnecessary when we have the two things that we need, okay? If I look at the next one, it says write the equation, the line graphed. Well, if you look at this thing, I don't know the slope and I don't know the y-intercept in terms of it just being written down for me. But if I look at the graph, I can find both of those things very easily. So as I look at this thing, I can see the ordered pairs that this thing goes through, right here, right here. And so I could count the slope to get from one point to the next. I have to go down 2 and then over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the slope is down 2 over 5, so it's a -2/5. The y-intercept is right here. That's the ordered pair 0, 3, which means my m value is right here. My b value is this guy. It's the 3. So now I can write the equation. Y equals a -2/5 x plus 3. Okay, I can go right to slope-intercept form because I have the slope and the y-intercept. If I look at the next one, it says write the equation line that passes through these points. I've got -2, 4, and 0, -3. Again, if I was doing this in point slope form, all right, which maybe you would do that this way, you'd still have to find the slope first. So here, I would find the slope. Remember, I do the second y value minus the first y value over the second x value minus the first x value. The second y value is a -3 minus the first y value is a 4. The second x value is a 0 minus the first one, which is a -2. Remember, subtracting is adding the opposite. Same thing down here. And so when I do this, -3 plus -4 is a -7. Down here, 0 plus 7 is a +2. And now from here, I can go right to slope-intercept form, and it's not because of this first ordered pair, it's because this guy right here. Remember, when you see the y-intercept as an ordered pair, it's always 0 comma something. It's when the x value is a 0. So this is my b value right here, so it's y equals -7/2 x and then a -3. And again, the worst case scenario here, maybe you don't recognize that 0, -3 as the y-intercept. what's going to happen to you is you're going to do this. You're going to plug it into point slope form. You're going to plug the y value in, and you're going to plug the x value in and get a +2. Remember, it's the opposites when we plug it into those guys. And then from here, you know what you're going to do? You're going to distribute. So just to show you this real quickly. Remember, that's a times 2 and a divided by 2, so that's a -7. And now you're going to add the 4 to each side. Spoiler alert, you're about to get the same thing I already have written down. Okay? Yeah, it took you a couple extra steps, but that's okay. All right? You can always plug it into point slope form and go from there. But it's nice if you recognize the y-intercept. Okay? If I look at the next one, same kind of deal here. If I'm finding the slope, I have to do the second y value minus the first y value over the second x value minus the first x value. The second y value is a 17 minus the first y value is a 5. The second x value is a 4 minus the first x value is a 0. So that's 12 over 4, which is a 3. So that's my slope. That's m. And now right here, 0, 5, that means that's the y-intercept, so my b value is right here, it's a 5. And I can go right to the answer and say y equals 3x plus 5. And again, if you don't recognize that that is the y-intercept, that's okay. You're going to take one of those ordered pairs, you're going to plug it into point slope form like we did previous to this lesson, and you're going to distribute and move the y, and you're going to be fine. You're going to get the same thing, okay? If I look at the next one, again, it's about recognizing the y-intercept when you see it as an ordered pair, okay? So this one, the slope here, y2 minus y1, so second y value minus the first, second x value minus the first. The second y value is a -2 minus the first y value is a 4. The second x value is a 0 minus the first x value is an 8. Remember, subtraction is adding the opposite. So that is a -6 over a -8. Negative divided by negative is a positive, and I can reduce this fraction. That's a 3/4. Okay? But now if I recognize that this guy is giving me the y-intercept, well, then I can just go right to the answer. Y equals 3/4 x minus 2. And again, if you do not recognize that y-intercept, that is okay. You'll do this instead. You'll plug one of these ordered pairs in, maybe this guy. Okay, you'll do exactly what we did in a previous lesson. Plug in the ordered pair. Now you'll distribute the 3/4, you'll add the 4, and you'll get the same thing I have right now. Okay? And the fact of the matter is that it's rare that we're just going to be given the exact two things that we need. So in this one, when you look at it, so here, I would find the slope like I always do. So let's find the slope. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. The second y value is a 9 minus the first y value is a 5. The second x value is a -3 minus the first x value, which is a -1. And now subtraction is adding the opposite. So here this gives me a 4 over a -2, which is -2. But now look at those ordered pairs. Neither of those is the y-intercept, so I can't just jump into y-intercept and slope-intercept form. I don't have the y-intercept, okay? So here's a situation where I don't really have much of a choice. I'm going to write it in point-slope form. Think about what's given. See, slope-intercept form, if the slope and the intercept is given, you can write slope-intercept form. But if you have the slope and two random points, you can write it in point-slope form because you have a point and the slope. And so if I do point slope form, again, remember it's this guy. And again, I know we've gone through this a couple times, but those minus signs are like opposite signs, okay? So here, that's going to be the -2. I've got my x and I've got my y. And then I just pick one of these ordered pairs. It doesn't matter which one I choose. Maybe I'll pick the first one. But remember, that's a -1 I see for x, so over here I plug in a +1, all right? That's what having this minus sign here means. It means do the opposite when you plug this thing in. Same thing here, I have a +5, so over here I'm going to write a -5, all right? And now to put this in slope-intercept form, I distribute the -2. That's a -2x minus 2. And now to get y by itself, I just have to add the 5. So what I end up with is y equals a negative 2x plus 3. Okay? And again, you could do this for every single one of the problems that we've done. Yeah, will it take you a little bit longer for some of them? Absolutely. All right. But if you're looking for consistency and you don't want to have to look for more than one thing, you can always write it in point slope form. And some of you are going to prefer to do that. Some of you are just going to always write it in point slope form, regardless of the point that you're given, even if it is the y-intercept. And then you're going to rewrite it like this. Okay. And again, when you don't have the y-intercept, this is the way you have to do it. Okay. If I look at the next one, same kind of thing. Let's find the slope first, okay? Let's find the slope. Y2 minus y1, second y value minus the first y value, second x value minus the first x value. The second y value is an 8 minus the first one is a negative 2. The second x value is a negative 1 minus the first x value is a 3. And now once again, subtraction, same as adding, the opposite. I almost always change that. So that gives me a 10. Down here, I can do the same thing. It's adding the opposite. All right. So now I can see that that's a negative 1 plus a negative 3. So it's a bunch of negatives, negative 4. And now positive divided by negative is a negative, but then reduce the fraction. It's 5 over 2. Okay. Now I'm going to write this in point slope form. Remember, I've got my y, I've got my x, but point slope form, so the slope goes here. And now I do the opposite. And it doesn't matter which order pair you choose. Last time I chose the first order pair. This time let's choose the second order pair. Ready? So instead of a negative 1, I'm going to put a positive 1, a plus 1 for x. Instead of a positive 8, I'm going to put a minus 8 with y. All right? It's the opposite. And now I'm going to use my distributive property. Ready? Distribute this guy. And don't be afraid of the fractions, okay? Especially with the x. That's just a negative 5 halves x. It just stays the same. And then here's an easy one. Negative 5 halves times 1. Anything times 1 is itself, so it just stays as a negative 5 halves. And now from here, I have to add the 8 to each side. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably looking at this going, oh, that's pretty ugly, Mr. Jansen. Well, let's take it off to the side. Ready? A negative 5 halves plus 8. I have to get common denominators here. That's like 8 over 1. I got to multiply by 2 over 2. Going old school, and I'm sure you have a calculator that can do this for you. If you're a wimp, I'm gonna do it by hand. I'm amazing. That's 11 over 2. So I get y equals negative 5 halves x plus 11 over 2. Whew. And can you imagine that this one would have been messy no matter what, because I've got a really weird y-intercept. This one's honestly looks better when we leave it in point slope form. And that's why we have all these different versions. Sometimes one version of the equation is better than another version, okay? Last one, I believe here. Write the equation of the line that's graphed, all right? And when you think about the last one like this we we counted the slope, and then we looked at the graph and got the y-intercept. Ready? So here's some points that this thing goes through. Let's count the pattern. Let's count the slope. It's up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. So the slope, rise over run, is up 2 over 3. Well, that was easy. Oh, let's write down the y-intercept. It's clearly 0, comma, uh-oh. Hopefully you're looking at that going, well, it looks like maybe 1.5 or 1.25 or 1 and something. See, it's a fraction. I can't tell exactly what it is, so I'm not sure. It's some fraction. And see, if you're me, I can tell exactly what that fraction is just based on the slope that we have. But I would not expect most of you to be able to do that, and that's okay. It's actually 1 1/3, all right? I know, crazy, right? But watch this. Here's what we're going to do instead. Just identify an ordered pair like we did previously. Like maybe I'll take this one. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's negative 5, comma, negative 2. And if I just write this in point slope form, ready? I always like to set up my values. The slope goes here. And now the opposite of the x value is a plus 5. The y value is a minus 2, so over here I put a plus 2. And now I just have to rearrange this thing. Ready? Distribute. I distribute the 2/3. Again, dealing with fractions always scares people. It's just 2 times 5 is 10, and then divided by 3, I'm just going to leave as divided by 3, okay? And now I'm going to subtract that 2 from each side. And once again, you can take that off to the side and do it, all right? If you've got one of those fancy calculators with the ABC buttons, then good for you. I don't have one of those, so I'm going to take it off to the side. So I got to get common denominators. That's like 3 over 3. I got to multiply. That's 10 over 3 minus 6 over 3. So that's going to give me a 4 over 3, which in case you're wondering what 4 over 3 is as a mixed number, it's 1 1/3, which is the thing I said the y-intercept was earlier, okay? And that's just because I have very advanced skills when it comes to fractions, all right? I've practiced them probably a bit more than some of you folks have, and that's okay. And if you can look at that and start to think about slope in a different way and realize that you could go down 2/3, back 1, you might be able to figure out that y-intercept without having to go through what we just went through also, okay? But again, find the slope, use a point, use point slope form the way we were using point slope form, but then rearrange it. Going from point slope form to slope intercept is very easy. It's always the same 2 steps. Distribute, add or subtract that y value, okay? So again, to write equations in slope intercept form, if you have the slope and the y-intercept, great. Plug it into y equals mx plus b. But if you don't have one of those things, find the slope, find a point, point slope form, rearrange it to y equals mx plus b. Okay?